Hi guys, my name is Dakota Graff. I'm here on the showroom floor for Stronghold Roasters. I'm Director of Coffee for Onyx Coffee Lab. Today we're going to roast some coffee on the Stronghold S7. So I am roasting a washed grade 1 Yirgacheffe, and we're going to talk a little bit about my roast approach. My machine is at temp, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on the roasting. So when I'm roasting washed coffees, generally I like to do a pretty heavy heat application, especially in the first 3 to 4 minutes. That's kind of what is commonly known as like a drying phase. We're mostly just losing moisture, but I do it to kind of set us up for success for the rest of the roasting. And on this coffee, I know from experience, because I roasted a lot of it yesterday, it's going to sort of lag after turnaround, so I'm really gonna punch that heat. Right now my settings are around 5 for halogen, 3 for hot air, and my agitation stays static at 8 until the end of the roast. So we're gonna approach my first adjustment. My halogen started out slightly higher than my hot air, but I'm about to change that. So we're gonna go all the way to 9 on my hot air, and that's just to really start to apply some heavy heat to this coffee, because I know it likes to lag a little bit. I'm also going to adjust my halogen up to 7.5. We're doing a 450 gram dose today, which is, it's actually slightly larger than what I usually roast. But I kind of have a band. I like to stick within 300 to 500 grams. The max capacity of this machine is around 800 grams, a little bit more than 800 grams, but I like to stay a little lower than max capacity. This gives the coffee a little bit more room. I think I can get punchier roasts out of it as well. All right, so at 120 minutes, we are at turnaround. I'm probably gonna make another heat adjustment. I think I'm gonna add a little bit more heat. So I'm at 10 on hot air, 8.5 on halogen. That's actually some of the heaviest heat application I do on the Stronghold S7. I know that this coffee is super dense and it's a very clean wash coffee, so I can really punch that heat up. I like to roast fast. Generally my roasts on the Stronghold S7 are anywhere from 8 to 9 minutes. That's kind of my roasting philosophy for most machines. My approach is as fast as possible without scorching or tipping, and I try to, taste it. If there's astringency, maybe I'll lengthen the roast, but they tend to not be really astringent at all on these machines, so I'm not too worried about that right now. So we're gonna approach a peak ROR within the next few seconds. This coffee, like I said, likes to kind of lag a little bit before it changes. So I'm just gonna really punch that heat and make sure we get through color change and start to peel that heat back in anticipation for first crack. So we are on the showroom floor. We're here in Milan. It's a bit loud, so I will be listening for first crack a little bit when it's approaching. But we've got several minutes before that. So my roast approach for wash coffees, I've kind of talked about it. I like to do a lot of heat up front. I do what is kind of commonly known as a soap, but that's not really what's happening because I don't have a lot of conductive roasting happening at the beginning of the roast, other than just the tower drum temp being at temp. But I like to apply the hot air in sort of a lag. So I do anywhere from 30 to 40 seconds where I apply halogen, it's almost like a primer for heat application. So I let that halogen, that radiant heat really kind of penetrate the coffee, and then I hit it with that hot air. And then I'll taper back the halogen over the course of the roast. As I said, I'll make my first adjustment around color change, and that's really because of that radiant heat. As we approach color change, I've noticed that I can get some more harsh or roasty notes in the coffee when I'm applying a lot of halogen at the end of the roast. So I like to use it pretty liberally up front and then less so in the back end of the roast. All right, so we're about to approach color change. We're looking pretty good. I think I'm around 4.5 ROR right now. I think everything's going pretty smoothly, so I think I'm gonna adjust down 1 full setting on my halogen. So like I said, I was talking about roasting wash coffees, but when I approach roasting coffees on the Stronghold S7, the relative framework is kind of always the same for me, and I will alter my roast approach based on processing, but it really is based on flavor. So I'm cupping, I'm tasting these coffees, I'm making like determinations on what I want to achieve in the coffee. Obviously the coffee has some inherent values that I'm going to bring out or kind of change slightly. But if this is like a washed geisha, I'm going to be roasting super similarly. If it's like a heavily processed, maybe a natural, anaerobic natural, maybe carbonic maceration, I'm going to adjust those slightly. I usually kind of lengthen the roast, and I definitely wouldn't apply heat in the front end as much, because that really, sometimes I notice that I can kind of scorch the outside, because these machines are very powerful and I like to roast smaller batches. So that allows me to roast as fast as I would like, but not apply too much heat. You may have noticed I made another adjustment. I'm just kind of tapering that heat back or well within color change. So I'm starting to anticipate first crack. It's pretty straightforward roast, nothing too fancy, but I'm feeling good. Just gonna bump down my halogen one more. I usually don't adjust more than like 1.5 or 2, and that's max one adjustment I would make during the roast. I tend to adjust, especially with the smaller batches, just half steps down. That allows me to kind of taper gently and have super nice control over the roast. I also use the tryer quite liberally. I don't pull it completely out, but I just like to take little peeks at the coffee, see what's going on, see how the roast is going, say hello, stuff like that. All right, so we're backing off the roast still. Everything's looking pretty good. So I'm anticipating first crack within the next minute or so. We're gonna approach that, and then we'll see what happens. Some tips for roasting on the Stronghold S7 just in general. I've noticed that if I want to roast coffees faster or adjust kind of my roast time, I use batch size as a variable. When you're talking about traditional drum roasting techniques, people usually just stay very static across a lot of variables, and that includes batch size. I actually, on the Stronghold S7, I use it as a variable, so I will play with my batch sizes up and down to achieve different roast levels. So I'm anticipating first crack any moment. And there it is, first crack. So I'm gonna adjust my heat down. I've applied a lot of heat. I'm gonna actually bump my agitation up. That's gonna just increase some of the convection, decrease some of the conduction. That'll help us kind of keep this roast under control. I'm really gonna apply some pretty aggressive heat peeling now. The end of the roast is where a lot of the action happens. Especially on this coffee, it can be quite explosive at first crack, so it's looking pretty good. And that's a release. So like I said, this is a 450 gram batch. I did a decent amount of development. I'm feeling pretty good about it, but I'll just have to taste and see. So this has been our roasting journey. I'm really excited to taste this coffee. This is my profile. I think that this profile works very well for wash coffees. I'm super excited to taste this coffee, and thanks for joining us at Stronghold.